Have you ever wondered who exactly put the moon there? Why do scientists think it shouldn't even be where it is? Think about it. Such a massive object has been hanging above our heads, always staring at us with the exact same face. It has witnessed humanity's slow evolution from prokaryotic cells in the water to land-dwelling creatures, and we seem to have grown accustomed to its presence. But when astronomers began to scrutinize it, a question arose. What exactly is the moon? Its diameter is 1/4 that of Earth, and its mass is 1/81st of Earth's. In the planetary family of the solar system, this ratio is unique and completely unreasonable. It's like a lion being followed by a half-grown cheetah as a sidekick. It just breaks the rules. Even more bizarrely, seismometers from the Apollo program revealed that when the moon is struck by meteorites, it rings like a giant bell for hours. This phenomenon spawned an incredibly crazy hypothesis. The moon might be hollow, coupled with its near-perfect circular orbit and the bizarre tidal locking that keeps only one side facing Earth. All these clues are enough to subvert common sense. Could it be an observation post monitoring Earth, a coincidental mishmash from the Big Bang, or the sole witness to a cosmic-scale hit-and-run? Grab some popcorn. Let's dive into where this most familiar yet strange sphere, which has been hanging over our heads for 4.5 billion years, actually came from. To crack this mystery, we must start with an early pioneer named George Darwin. Yes, his father was the famous biologist, Charles Darwin. He proposed a very wild hypothesis. Billions of years ago, when Earth was still a rapidly spinning fireball, covered in boiling magma, it spun so fast that the immense centrifugal force stretched it into the shape of a football. Then, in an unguarded moment, it flung off a massive chunk of its own flesh, and this discarded chunk became today's moon. It's a very vivid image, right? A biological daughter flung out into space, but a problem immediately arises. Just how fast did Earth have to spin back then to fling off such a massive chunk? After several rounds of precise calculations by scientists, the results came out. Earth's rotation speed at the time would have had to be at least 2.5 hours per day. This is simply impossible. No physical model can support such a crazy rotational speed. Therefore, the fission hypothesis was ruled out. Well, since it wasn't born from Earth, could it have been captured or snatched? After all, in the astronomical community, as long as your mass is large enough, capturing a passing sidekick in your own territory is standard operation. Thus, a new scenario was conceived. A wild moon was wandering freely through the universe and accidentally plunged headlong into Earth's gravity trap. It only intended to pass through, but unexpectedly ended up staying for billions of years. This explanation sounds much more reasonable. After all, in the solar system, Mars and Jupiter both have sidekicks captured in this way. But before the case could be closed, celestial mechanics stepped forward to pour cold water on it. This isn't capturing a sidekick. This is catching a supersonic bullet bare-handed. The probability of capturing such a massive celestial body unscathed into a near-perfect circular orbit is so low that it can be ignored. And the most fatal blow came again from DNA testing. Oxygen isotope analysis revealed that Earth and the Moon were born in the same region of the solar system. They are locals, not some alien, wild planet at all. At this point, the entire astronomical community fell silent. The two seemingly most reasonable origins had been overturned. But note that a key clue was left in the previous evidence. Since they are locals, doesn't that mean they share the same place of origin? Thus, the third theory logically took the stage. Is it possible that they are twins, formed simultaneously in the same massive dust cloud, one larger, one smaller? This almost perfectly explains why their DNA is so similar. At the time, many scientists thought this must be the final answer. But just when everyone believed this scenario was definitely correct, that old problem popped up again, and this time it was even sharper. Once again, the co-formation theory was out. Fission, capture, and co-formation were all overthrown. The mainstream scientific community's investigation seemed to have hit a dead end. And just as scientists were puzzling over the lunar soil brought back by Apollo and analyzing those strange moonquake data, another boldest, the moon is not a natural celestial body at all. It is a deliberately manufactured giant spaceship. Don't laugh just yet. This spaceship moon hypothesis is not unfounded. It directly targets all the anomalies that mainstream science cannot explain. First, why might the moon be hollow? Because Apollo experiments showed that it vibrates like a giant bell when struck. How could a solid stone sphere do that? But if it were a spaceship with a solid shell and an internal hollow structure, it would make sense. Second, why is the moon disproportionately large relative to Earth? Because if it were a designed observation post or base, it would need a sufficiently large volume to carry equipment and energy, and to maintain its own stability. Third, and most bizarrely, the lunar rocks. Analysis revealed that the lunar surface contains large amounts of high melting point, high-strength rare metals like titanium, chromium, and lithium. These metals are all materials used to build top-tier spacecraft on Earth. Why would they be concentrated on the lunar surface? All these coincidences, which are difficult for mainstream theories to explain, seem to point to that chilling possibility. The moon is a massive construct parked in Earth's orbit by some super civilization. Isn't this story more thrilling than all the previous hypotheses? But the charm of science lies in the fact that it allows for the boldest imagination while demanding the strictest verification. When more advanced probe data was transmitted back to Earth, this sci-fi story also met its end. First, the hollow moon theory was proven to be a misunderstanding. The reason the moon rings for so long is that its interior is extremely dry, solid, and intact. It is not fragmented by water and plate tectonics like Earth, so seismic waves can travel unimpeded through it for a long time, much like striking a bell made of a perfect, giant rock. But this is entirely different from being hollow. Second, although those so-called aerospace metals do exist, their isotopic signatures and abundance ratios perfectly conform to the natural formation patterns of the early solar system, showing no traces of artificial smelting. Therefore, even though the spaceship moon is an incredibly fascinating story, in the face of cold, hard scientific evidence, it can only be parked back in the hangar of science fiction. So, since it wasn't born, wasn't captured, isn't a twin, and certainly isn't an alien spaceship, what exactly is the truth? All clues seem to have been cut off. To explain all this, we must return to the starting point, to the scene of a true cosmic scale murder. This theory is our mainstream understanding today, the giant impact hypothesis. It is no longer a heartwarming family drama, but a cosmic sci-fi blockbuster filled with destruction and creation. Let's turn the clock back 4.5 billion years to the crime scene. The protagonist is our primordial Earth, Gaia, and the mysterious perpetrator is a Mars-sized planet that scientists named Theia. The solar system at that time was like a chaotic cosmic billiard hall. Theia, this deadly billiard ball, did not hit head-on, but struck Earth obliquely at an extremely tricky angle. At that moment, the heavens fell and the Earth rent. Theia itself was smashed to pieces, and Earth's mantle was torn open. Billions of tons of molten rock fragments were hurled into space, forming a deadly ring of debris glowing with a dark red light around Earth. Imagine this scene. How violent and magnificent it must have been. But the end of destruction was the beginning of rebirth. Under the influence of gravity, these fragments snowballed together and recoalesced in a very short period, ultimately forming the moon we see today. The story up to this point is simply perfect. This theory acts like a skeleton key, unlocking all the previous mysteries. Why is the moon so large? Because it was created by a planetary collision, there was plenty of material. Why is it iron depleted? Because what was knocked out was mantle material. The heavy iron cores of both planets mostly remain within the new Earth. Why is the DNA both similar and different? Because it is a mixture of Earth and Theia. The entire chain of evidence points to Theia as the perpetrator. The logic forms a perfect closed loop. The motive, process, and result are all explained clearly. This is simply a perfect cosmic crime, right? The story seems ready to be closed here, but just as scientists were preparing to pop the champagne, lunar rock samples brought back by Apollo, when examined under more precise instruments, revealed a tiny detail sufficient to upend the whole picture. A shocking plot twist emerged, almost as if the vast majority of the moon came from Earth. If it truly is a mixture, where did Theia's genes go? Did it just vanish like a ghost? To explain this, scientists were forced to propose an even bolder hypothesis. You see, one mystery led to an even bigger one. The second loophole, the missing volatiles. The moon is extremely depleted in easily vaporized elements like water, zinc, and sodium. The high temperatures of the giant impact can indeed explain part of this, but the moon is far too dry, much drier than theoretical calculations suggest. Where did the rest go? No one knows. The third loophole, the unexplainable temperature. Analysis of potassium isotopes in lunar rocks suggests that the temperature at which the moon formed was much higher than simulated by our wildest giant impact models. This means the severity of that car crash might have exceeded our current physical imagination. As you can see, even this most mainstream and successful theory is not flawless. What we thought was the closing argument was actually just the beginning of a new round of investigation. The moon, this silent witness, still guards its core secrets. One collision, two worlds from the disaster of creation to a harbor in the stars. Therefore, this cosmic cold case spanning 4.5 billion years is still under investigation today. However, for us, this disaster was the luckiest accident in the universe. It was precisely that violent collision that gave Earth its stable seasons and provided us with a massive gravitational bodyguard, which has shielded us from countless fatal impacts over billions of years. It was the tides triggered by the moon that washed over ancient shores, carving out the first cradle for the birth of life. So, looking back at the starry sky, we see more than just an orphan left behind by a disaster. That impact 4.5 billion years ago, which shaped our world, unexpectedly left us with a loyal guardian in space. The endpoint of this grand cosmic event, which began 4.5 billion years ago, is perhaps not the birth of life on Earth, but the starting point for human civilization to journey into the sea of stars. The next time you look up and see the moon, I hope you see a magnificent cosmic history, a hopeful springboard for the future, and humanity's great insatiable curiosity. It is the unluckiest and most bizarre moon. It is safe to say that, looking across the solar system, aside from our moon, it is absolutely the most unique existence, even subverting the laws of planetary science. Given its distance from the sun, it should have frozen into an ice block billions of years ago. But the reality is exactly the opposite. It burns like crazy, shooting its magma into space like fountains hundreds of kilometers high, literally melting itself from the inside out. That's right, it is the only magma moon in the solar system, Jupiter's moon Io. It is an endlessly erupting planet-sized supervolcanic sphere. So the question arises, all other moons in the solar system are freezing cold, so why is it the only one capable of emitting hellish flames? And who painted its bizarre colors? Why might it change our entire perspective on life energy and even alien worlds? Get ready. We are sending you there right now to witness this unparalleled spectacle in the solar system. To unlock the secrets of Io, we need to investigate them one by one. First is a fundamental question. Where does its heat come from? In the solar system, there are generally only three ways to make a planet run a fever. First, being close to the sun and getting baked. But Io is farther away than Mars. From there, the sun is just a slightly larger star. We can pass on that. Second, like Earth, relying on the decay of internal radioactive elements for heating. But Io is too small. This little spark should have died out billions of years ago. Pass. Third, primordial heat left over from its formation. This is even more impossible. It would have cooled down completely long ago. You see, all the conventional suspects have perfect alibis. So who is the real culprit? The clue is hidden in its orbit. Io's orbit is not a perfect circle, but a slightly elongated ellipse. Why? Because it is not fighting alone. Its two neighbors, Europa and Ganymede, act like two bullies, constantly tugging and pulling it from behind with their gravity, while its boss, Jupiter, pulls it from the front with even stronger gravity. In this cosmic gravitational tug-of-war, Io becomes the unluckiest one, constantly stretched, squeezed, and kneaded by three opposing forces in an extremely precise cosmic rhythm. Now imagine you have a paperclip in your hand. If you repeatedly and quickly bend it straight and then fold it, it will become scorching hot in no time. Io is that paperclip, having been bent back and forth by the universe for billions of years. The immense friction generated by this gravitational tearing is the mastermind we've been looking for. It is the true heat source that ignites this hellish heart. Scientists have given this process a name: tidal heating. All right, now that we've found the heat source, please land on this moon and see for yourself how outrageous this crime scene is. At first glance, you would think someone knocked over an entire palette on Io's surface. Bright yellows, deep reds, eerie greens. It doesn't look like a moon at all. It looks more like a crazy abstract painting. But this is not art. It is extreme, violent chemistry. These colors almost all come from a single element you are very familiar with: sulfur, the source of that rotten egg smell in your house. Io's more than 400 supervolcanoes constantly spew sulfur and sulfur dioxide into space like fireworks. These substances freeze and settle in the extreme cold of space, blanketing the entire moon. Those large yellow patches are crystallized pure sulfur. Those red and orange scars are freshly erupted, still hot sulfur that has undergone chemical changes when exposed to radiation. Those white patches, do you think they are snow? Not at all. They are sulfur dioxide, frozen into frost. When Io moves into Jupiter's shadow, the temperature plummets, and its thin atmosphere literally crashes and collapses, falling to the ground like a chemical blizzard. What about that eerie green? Scientists believe it might be a molecule that is extremely unstable on Earth, but is produced in massive quantities under Io's intense radiation and high temperatures. So you see, Io is the largest alchemy workshop in the solar system. Jupiter's gravity provides the furnace. The volcanoes are responsible for spraying the raw materials, and Jupiter's powerful radiation is the invisible hand of the alchemist mixing the colors. As for its most bizarre feature, it's the mountains. On Earth, volcanoes are usually majestic mountain ranges, like Mount Fuji. But on Io, please forget everything you know about volcanoes. The volcanoes here simply don't play by the rules. This kind of mysterious cosmic puzzle is perfect for pondering before bed, yet you might worry about your phone screen staying on all night if you fall asleep. At times like this, I use Qi Shui music in the bottom left corner to turn on its Listen to TikTok mode. It can play with the screen locked, and after setting a sleep timer, I can continue thinking about the next question. That brings us back to Io's most bizarre feature: mountains. It doesn't build mountains. It only melts the ground. Look at the infamous Loki Patera. It is not a mountain, but a massive lava lake as wide as Lake Ontario. Its surface periodically cools and solidifies, and then, due to immense pressure from below, it completely overturns, setting off a wave of scorching lava that stretches for hundreds of kilometers. Other volcanoes don't even have craters. They erupt directly from fissures in the crust, like wounds in the earth, frantically pouring lava in all directions to form vast magma seas. Yet, on this land of fire and destruction, it is not a volcano. On a moon that is constantly melting and collapsing, how did such a towering peak form? This is exactly one of Io's deepest secrets. Also God. Scientists believe it wasn't uplifted, but squeezed out. This leads to the latest subversive discovery. We always thought that beneath Io's crust lay a global magma ocean, but the latest gravity data from NASA's Juno spacecraft shows we were wrong. There might not be a unified magma ocean underground on Io. Instead, there are hundreds or thousands of independent magma chambers of various sizes. It's like a pressure cooker, with countless independent burners, each providing energy to the surface volcanoes at its own rhythm. This also explains why every volcano on Io has its own unique temper and personality. Returning to our ultimate question, why do we study such a hellscape? An unlucky moon repeatedly tortured by gravity and continuously torn apart by volcanoes, because it acts as a time machine. To understand this, we must first travel back 4.5 billion years. Please forget the gentle blue home beneath your feet. The newly born Earth was an amplified version of a hellish furnace, even more terrifying than Io. At that time, Earth's rotation was extremely fast. A day might have lasted only a few hours. The immense centrifugal force and the super tides triggered by the moon's extreme proximity repeatedly tore and kneaded our planet's young crust. Beneath the crust was a global, churning magma ocean. On the surface, there was no oxygen and no oceans, only tens of thousands of supervolcanoes erupting continuously. What they spewed was not ordinary magma, but ultramafic lava, which is rich in magnesium and iron and has an extremely high temperature. This lava was highly fluid, repeatedly washing over and reshaping the entire surface like a scorching flood. The atmosphere was filled with sulfides, and carbon dioxide erupted from volcanoes, similar to Io, and the sky might have appeared an eerie red or yellow. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's right. The long-vanished Hadean Earth, which we will never witness with our own eyes, had volcanic activity patterns, lava compositions, and atmospheric conditions, almost all key features that read like the script for today's Io. It's just that Earth later slowly cooled down, forming a stable crust and oceans, and its volcanic activity became mild. Io, however, because of that never-ending gravitational tug-of-war, was forever locked in that violent hell mode. Therefore, scientists believe that the ultra-high temperature lava on Io is very similar to the mantle material of our Earth when it first formed 4.5 billion years ago. By understanding today's Io, we might be able to understand the childhood of our own planet. More importantly, it is a revelation of energy. We have always believed that life must rely on the light and heat of a sun. But Io tells us that through gravitational tidal forces alone, an energy-rich world with extremely active chemical reactions can be created in the depths of a freezing universe. So, in the universe, could the interiors of those invisible rocky moons orbiting giant planets also be quietly heated in the same way? Beneath their thick ice shells, could life forms we have never imagined be born as a result? Io, this forbidden moon of the solar system, uses its most violent methods to point us in a completely new direction for finding extraterrestrial life. It is not just a moon, it is a living reminder, telling us that the laws of the universe are far wilder than our textbooks suggest. If a world like Io can truly exist, then among the billions of unseen planets in the Milky Way, how many more outrageous and crazy monsters are waiting to be discovered by us?